I'm demoing a new tool I built called Expresso, which is a tool that allows people who might not know how to program to build responsive web pages without writing any code. And so the way it works is it's through programming by demonstration. So the user actually demonstrates how the page should look at a couple different viewport sizes, and then the tool interpolates between those examples. And so to start off with, I'll show that we start with a static web page. The content on this page is we just hard-coded in a JSON file. In the future, it'd be great if we could actually import from real code bases, but that would be for later. So if we resize the page now, we see that at this page width of 870 pixels wide, the laptop's actually falling off the screen. So certainly this is just still a static web page. But what we might do instead is say, okay, at 982 pixels wide, the laptop should not be falling off the page. Instead, it should be centered within this blue region here. So what I'll do is create a new keyframe at that point and start directly manipulating the page. So you can either use your mouse or your arrow keys on the keyboard to just reposition and center the laptop here. I'll also just resize the background blue. Okay, and so now we have these two keyframes, as we're calling them. This is an analogy from animation software. If I now resize the page, we see that we now have this fluid behavior. So any point between 982 and 1200 pixels wide, we see that the laptop is remaining centered in that blue region. And the problem, though, is once you start making a smaller viewport size, the laptop starts overlapping the text here. And so we basically need to create another keyframe at a smaller viewport size to show what should happen at that point. And instead, what we'd want to happen here for these smaller pages is to have a single column rather than a two-column view. So I'll create a keyframe at, let's say, 970 pixels wide. And I'll say at this point, this is when the laptop should actually move to the bottom of the screen. Okay. And I'll resize this blue region to just be a little longer as well. I'll position these elements in the center. Have them actually entirely centered. Okay, and I'll make the logo just a little bigger as well. Okay, we now have at this narrower viewport size a single column view. So to get this to work, we actually, it's not quite there yet. If we resize the page and we start moving smaller, we see that things are starting to fly off the screen. This is an artifact of the default just interpolation between two side-by-side keyframes. What we need to do here is actually to make a jump transition between these two keyframes. So what this actually means is I'm going to just select all the elements on the page and say that between 970 and 982 pixels wide, I want the behavior to be that of the current keyframe. So basically between those two keyframes, I want to have a single column view. Okay. And so now if I resize the page, we have a static view at the narrower viewports, but we don't have elements jumping around strangely. And so finally, to actually get a fluid behavior where all the elements remain centered for those narrower viewports, I need to create a fourth and final keyframe to constrain that behavior. So for these for this 647 pixel wide viewport, I'm going to select all the elements and just use my arrow keys to center those. And resize this as well. And so now we should have a responsive web page. So for the narrower viewports, we have a single column view, and it's fluid within that range. And for the wider viewports, we have a wider view. We have a two-column view fluid within that range.